2020 was unprecedented, and yet everything that we have done for over 50 years prepared us for this moment.
This pandemic was not an equal opportunity pandemic.
Within the first 2 weeks, we had a 300% increase in requests for legal services from small businesses.
Our team went into 2020 knowing that we were going to spend the year fighting against immigration detention. What we didn't expect was that a pandemic would hit that turned immigration detention into a very real possible death sentence.
People were sleeping in a situation where they could literally reach out and touch the person in the bunk next to them. At meals, they were elbow to elbow.
We witnessed what the New York Times is calling the biggest movement in the United States history, the Black Lives Matter movement.
There's always rage, right? There's always anger, there's always sadness at loss of life. But I come to this work from, they're the rule, not the exception. We just happened to get George Floyd on camera.
The Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights of the San Francisco Bay Area is one of the oldest civil rights organizations on the West Coast. We exist to dismantle systems of oppression and white supremacy and racism.
With this program, because it was all remote, we were able to have 27 different lawyers doing 1-hour consultations. And they were able to do it quickly whenever the need arose. Some of these clients were in a position where their lease was about to expire. They needed help right away.
For me, that's really the model of an ideal pro bono partnership, where we can innovate and meet community demands together.
This small business owner who ran a donut shop in the Tenderloin was already struggling. COVID hit with the shelter-in-place orders, and the business largely had to shut down. And Louise and Mesa counseled the client, talked directly to the landlord, and with a lot of patience and some documentation, they were able to convince the landlord to give some rent relief and extend the time for payments on the rent.
When we are providing legal services to small businesses, particularly businesses owned by communities of color and people of color, we're effectively narrowing the racial wealth gap because we're supporting building wealth back up in communities where wealth has been stripped away by systemic racism.
And here they were actually being able to sell the donuts to people with a long line outside the business.
No one, regardless of their criminal history, regardless of their medical vulnerability, should be subjected to a death sentence in civil detention.
Our main goal was to depopulate the facilities that would then enable social distancing.
This is a case that involved incredibly aggressive discovery. And what those documents showed was that ICE knew exactly what it needed to do to protect people from the pandemic, and that it refused to do so because taking even the most basic safety precautions would impede on the logistics of detaining as many people as possible at any time possible. Without Cooley's support and expertise, we just would not have been able to get our arms around that information.
The judge actually described ICE's conduct as appalling, and appalling it was. They really did nothing to protect the detainee population who are in their care from the risk of COVID coming into the facility. And today, the population of the facilities is down to about 10% of their original capacity. We have weekly testing of staff and detainees, and the judge also stopped any new intakes.
Bad Boys Bail Bonds, open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Call 1-800-BAIL-OUT.
Bad Boys has a history of signing agreements with people who are trying to get their loved ones out of jail and not complying with the law. And so Bad Boys needs to stop harassing people for debt that they have under these agreements that isn't enforceable. Our named plaintiff, Kira Caldwell, she had experiences with Bad Boys calling her workplace and reporting to people that she worked with that she owed money on a bail bond, money that's not enforceable and that she doesn't owe under California law. They called her mother at her home number, and they harassed her mother until her mother had to change her phone number.
Partnering with Lawyers Committee, we were able to file a class action that challenges not just this one individual's or tries to vindicate this one individual's rights, but also really tries to take bail industry to task.
For-profit entities like Bad Boys, corporations whose interest is in maximizing their profits and not in serving the public, are wrapped up in people's ability to get their freedom and to get justice.
We at Keker are always very excited when Lawyers Committee reaches out to us to ask if we might be interested in collaborating on a case, because we know that Lawyers Committee is going to give us an opportunity to really make a change.
LCCRSF chose the Anti-Police Terror Project to be rewarded because this organization is both revolutionary and absolutely essential for the moment that we're living in.
We wanted to be not just reactionary, but also visionary around how we interrupted state-sponsored violence in our communities. And so that started a conversation around, well, where are all of the places where law enforcement is entangled inside of our communities where they don't need to be? And how much of our dollars are going to fund that instead of funding things that actually keep us safe?
So when the call to action came following George Floyd's death to defund the police, one of the biggest criticisms was exactly how and what are our communities going to look like without police presence there?
Mental Health First is a non-911 response program for mental health crisis. We launched in Oakland in August, and that's been really incredible. We weren't ready actually for the response to that across the board. There are surrounding cities in the Bay Area that want to bring mental health first. We're getting phone calls from all over the country from folks about how do we do this. These alternative models, they start in small replicable ways, but then they grow until they become the norm. And we see less and less utility for this thing that we've been using that was born out of the slave trade and has engaged in horrific rampant violence in our communities for 400 years. And we can replace it with something much more humane.
And we really look to them to make sure that the way that we're moving as a legal organization is in line with the work that they have done and in the work that the communities they work with are looking to do.
If we've learned anything in the last year is that we don't know what's coming. What we do know is that we are prepared, and we know that we are not alone in this work.
Find an opportunity to work with the Lawyers Committee. They're great lawyers, they're collaborative, and the work that you're going to do is going to be so meaningful. It was one of the highlights of my pretty long career at this point, and I guarantee you it'll be the same for you.
It's some of the most rewarding work we can do. You're actually yourself so uplifted by this work that it really is helping all of us get through this crisis as well.
As we do things, say for instance here in the state of California, where we changed the use of force policy for the first time in 150 years, right? When those new laws get violated, it's y'all that we turn to.
Our team of co-counsel set up a Zoom call with our initial class representatives after all of them had been released and were home with their families. It was so moving because when we had first sort of, met them over the phone, they were trapped, and the image of all of their faces in their homes, like every Zoom call with like kids running up to them, is definitely something that just makes me want to keep fighting.
The world that I'm fighting for is one in which everybody has equal access to joy. And what that really means is making sure that people have enough power, both individually and collectively, to ask for and access the things that they need to survive and thrive in their communities.
For over 50 years, we have worked to dismantle systems of racism brick by brick. I hope you'll continue on this journey with us towards racial justice, economic justice, and immigrant justice by donating your time and your resources and your hearts to this work.